Hi, welcome to Sewing Bee Unravelled, Unpicked, with me, Jane from Haberdasher. So we're on week 4 of Series 8, and it was Reduce, Reuse and Recycle. This is one of my favourite weeks so far. Well, it was my favourite week so far. Um, and for a number of reasons. The Transformation Challenge was kind of usable. They produced some usable garments at the end of that. The pattern challenge was really tough, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I really liked the made to measure, making something from an old duvet. So the pattern challenge was to make a quilted patchwork jacket with a bias binding edge. And they only had 4 hours and 15 minutes to do this. Now, that is cutting it fine, to say the least, because they had to make their fabric out of the patchwork squares. And that takes some really precise sewing, and you have to press as you go as well. So it is quite time consuming. They then had to quilt their fabric with a wadding in between and a lining on the back. And then they had to sew it together. And then they had to put this bias binding trim around the edge, and they wanted the corners mitered as well. So really quite a lot of work, and not highly technical, but you had to be very precise, especially with the patchwork squares. So those who sort of made quick decisions about how to lay out their patchwork squares and what colour schemes to go for, those who made quick decisions and sort of did them randomly, they could then get on and make the jacket. So they finished. Those who didn't, Steve and Manny, I think, took a long time deciding on the too long deciding on the layout of their patchwork colours and squares. When I think if you have lots of colours that are, similar colours, they all go together however you put them together. If you look at our patchwork bag in the window, that's a total mix of random cotton poplins. It's all a lot of our cotton poplins are in that bag, and they just go together. It just works. Colours just kind of blend together. So yeah, and then they had to do the quilting. So I've got a couple of little gadgets to help with quilting. So you might have seen some of the sewers were using this, which is a walking foot, and it clips onto your machine, and this bit goes over the needle shaft, and it just does some magic wizardry, and it slows the feed dogs down, or feeds fabrics differently somehow. I don't know exactly how it works, but it works with thick fabric, so it stops the fabric sort of getting all ruched up, and it's good for jerseys and also for slippery fabrics too. So we've got some of those in stock. They are £26 each. Okay. The bias binding trim, quite a few people didn't miter their corners. There's a couple of techniques of how to put the bias binding on. You can do it the proper way, and you open out your bias binding, stitch it, and then fold it to the other side, and then you can either stitch in the ditch, or you can stitch so that you can see the line. And to miter the corners, you go almost to the end, and then you have to fold your bias binding up and then back down again on itself to create the corner, and then I'll do a little tutorial on it. I probably need to practice myself because I haven't done it for a while. The other way is to put the bias binding on all in one go, so you fold it over and you stitch through both layers. This is a bias binding foot, which is a really handy little gadget to help with that. I did put a little tutorial on Facebook yesterday. It's got this guide here which you can slide, so depending on the width of your bias binding, and you literally clip it. It's a clip-on type, so you just clip it onto your as a normal foot, slide your fabric in, and then you can stitch your bias binding top and bottom together, and you get a nice evenly spaced from the edge so you can stay straight basically. When it comes to mitering the corners, you can do it. It doesn't look quite as good as doing it the other way because the edges aren't stitched down, but I'll try and do a little tutorial on that as well to show you how to do that. Okay, so the bias binding foot, they are £13, and we've got some of those in stock as well, which is very timely because they only came in this week. So that was good of me to kind of think ahead. What's coming? Yay. So I think, yes, some were really good. I think Deborah's was really good. And a lot of them, the patchwork was really good, but then the bias binding let them down. So I think Steve and Manny struggled with that because they just trying to put bias binding on really neatly when you're rushing. It's just going to be a nightmare. Right, pattern wise, I couldn't find anything like the pattern that they used. I did find a couple of waistcoat patterns, so they haven't got sleeves. So there is one on here, down here, which is bound all the way around the edges. So that's the kind of basic shape. It didn't have the sort of square neckline. And then that was a longer line ladies one. But yeah, I couldn't find anything in the McCall's range that was similar. I think there are other sort of indie patterns out there. The other jacket pattern that I'm really loving at the moment is this one from So Different, one of our indie designers. I'm actually wearing it. It's a very easy to put together jacket, and it's got these lovely big pockets. It's got sort of 3/4 sleeves. You could lengthen those if you wanted to, but it's all in one piece, so you haven't got to set a sleeve in, which is what's really nice about it. And this casing, what do you call it? Can't think. On the front is very easy to put on. There's no interfacing, there's no zips, there's no buttons. It's a great pattern. Okay, so that's that one. The transformation challenge was coats again. They had to take 2 coats and make them into one, taking features from both of the coats. I think this is one of the most wearable items that were ever produced on the transformation challenge. So we saw peplums and gathered sleeves and frills. Particularly good were Magni's. I thought she took a long sort of pattern coat and a quilted coat and put panels of quilting into the pattern coat. And Annie's leopard print little kind of swing coat she made. So it was, she took a red duffel coat, I think it was, and a leopard print coat and combined them. So there was red on the top panel. And used the duffel coat fastening and then the leopard print. It looked really funky. So that was those. Okay, I've got a little script today. I've got organised. I've given myself a couple more days to get ready. Made to measure was a maxi dress made out of an old duvet. This takes me back because when I was a teenager, I used to make quite a few things out of old duvets and sheets and things. Sometimes just to check that a pattern was okay, but I used to go to jumble sales and pick stuff up and take it home, wash it, dye it. Made lots of things out of that. So I did have a look at home, and I have got an old duvet and I'm going to make something out of it. So you'll have to see whether you can guess what it is when I'm next wearing it in the shop. So there were some really innovative designs and ideas here and how to use the duvet, because quite often duvets have a different front and a different back. So Jill used this to really good effect. So she had fine stripes on one side and big bold red blobs on the other side, and she combined those into those chevrons at the front, slightly crossover top, and then a full skirt. And those cape sleeves, so cape sleeves, it's just stitched at the top and then it's just kind of open, which is kind of a bit annoying if you're eating because it's just going to flop around. But you can put little ties on the wrist, or you can just waft. So pattern wise, for all of these, I don't think I found any patterns bar one that was the same as the dress. Sorry, that was my phone pinging off. I'm just going to turn it down. There we go. Yeah, so I've got some that give a nod to it, really. So 7969. So this is a crossover bodice, and then it's sort of gathered just below the bust. And you can do that sort of knee length or longer, maxi length even. So that was like Jill's, and that one as well, which is McCall's 7381, which is also a slight crossover top, only just crossing over at the front, almost a princess line, so it hangs from just below the bust. and you can do it with a knot detail if you want to. In fact, my friend is making that one, so I'll have to see what that looks like. Deborah did the it was kind of two-tier. There was a leopard print below a sort of a black and white sketch print, so you could see the leopard print coming through. It was quite clever, and it was kind of tied just under the bust to bring it in and give it some shape. Then it had the bright orange trim, the neon orange trim. Now Patrick came along and undid the tie and said, oh, I like that line better. But if you're a curvy lady, you just want to show off your curves a bit, I think, and by bringing it in with the tie, I think it gave it a better shape. So anyway, I couldn't find a dress with that tie. I did find a blouse with that kind of tie. It is McCall's 7803, so it's got this tie feature here. It pulls it all in. Hers had short sleeves, and then you could use this and just lengthen it because it's got this kind of peplum on it. That's the line drawings on the back there. Okay, so that's 7803. I'm not showing any fabrics today because they were old duvets, so my fabrics aren't like old duvets. Well, they can get some very nice ones, but duvets are going to be cotton, 100% cotton usually, maybe a bit of polycotton. So any of the cotton poplins would make something suitable. And if you want something a bit finer, cotton wool. Christian, I really like Christian's. It was a kind of an Indian print duvet, and he used the trim, the turquoise trim, to create a waistband detail, and then he had to make it a bit longer, so he cleverly put a band on and a frill at the bottom. So this is a similar kind of thing, and it's got that waistband detail and some trim. Shows how you can use a different colour trim around the edges. That's McCall's 7624, and it's also got kind of grown on sleeves. So grown on sleeves are like this jacket. They're not inserted into a sleeve head. They're just all part of the pattern piece for the front and the back. Marnie's took inspiration from a celebrity outfit. I wasn't sure, I missed who it was. And I'm not really up on my celebrities, I'm afraid. She was going for a sort of a leopard print look, and she found on an online charity, which I'm going to have to look up because I didn't even know online charities existed, or in online charity shops, sorry. So it was a kind of leopard printy pastel blob, and then she home dyed some trim to create the contrast, and hers was like a wrap over top, and then half stitch down the slit, and then just open. So we had this one before, actually, this pattern 7745, in the first week when they had to make a wrap dress. I think I pulled this one out then. It's a really nice wrap dress. So you can either do it with little shoestring straps, or you can make it with proper little cap sleeves, or they do a cold shoulder version as well. I'll show you the line drawing on the back. Ooh, get my finger out the way, there we go. So that is McCall's 7745. She got picked up on, there was a bit of bagging at the waist here. They said she could put it done with some bust darts in there to give it a bit more shaping. Annie, she did, it was a very 70s fabric. It was a really dark green background with those big daisies and buttercups and a pink flower on it. And then she inserted, they called it crochet lace. I think we call it Cluny lace. It's like a very finely crocheted, I suppose, or lace trim. We got it in different widths. And she inserted that to create extra interest in the panels, which I thought was clever. But hers needed a bit of shaping as well. It didn't fit very well around the bust. So did I have something similar to that? Yeah, I've got 7743 and yeah, 7743, sorry, which is more of a princess line. That's a plus size, so that goes up to a size 24, so it goes up to 8 to 24. And 7970 is the other one I've got. I've made this dress, not the long one, the which one have I done? This one, with the little sleeves. It's like a false wrap over. Well, it does wrap over and then the skirt is stitched straight, but in the maxi version it's got tiers and they're offset to give it a bit of interest. It does take quite a bit of fabric, but that's what a duvet can give you. So that was Annie. Going over the page, sorry, this is a problem with having a paper script, isn't it? So Brogan made Little Bo Peep, not to everyone's taste, I think. Well, the Patrick seemed to think that the young folk would be queuing up to wear a dress like that. I asked my nearly 17-year-old, and I won't tell you what she said, but she won't be in the queue. So she had chosen some very chintzy floral prints, very typical Brogan, I think, sort of pastel-y, quite sort of 70s feel about them. And she made a bodice with a big Peter Pan collar, lacy collar, and then it had a gathered skirt at the waist, so it was quite a few frills. She came unstuck with her gathers on her skirt. They weren't very even, which is what happens when you don't have enough time, because gathers do take a long time to get them all nicely spaced out. And that brings me on to another gadget, another foot. This little gem is a gathering foot. I have yet to try it. I've seen a demo of it. This screws in onto your shank on your machine, and what it does is you lengthen your stitch and it gathers as you go. So you do your lock stitch to start, so forward and back to start, then you lengthen your stitch and away you go, and it starts to gather it all up as you go, and it gives nice even gathers. So I'm going to give that a go later today if it's not too busy. Right, so that was Brogan and her, I have patterns for Brogan. Have I done those? No, here we go. It's right in front of me. So hers was like a bodice and then a gathered skirt onto it. So that's a similar kind of thing. Obviously, it hasn't got the Peter Pan, the big collar, but I'm sure something exists out there. So that is McCall's 8085. Angela did a two-tone pink. Oh no, this is another Brogan one, sorry. There's a bodice with gathers on the bottom. That's McCall 7774. Right, Angela, this is the one pattern I found, which I'm pretty damn sure is the one that she used, and she just lengthened it. So she did two tones, sort of pink and green, and combined the two colours together. It was a button-down sundress with sort of chunky straps. So it was quite semi-fitted bodice, buttons all down the front. And it was really nicely made, but it was a bit too long. So this is the pattern. It's McCall's 7950. It was this stripy one here that she did, but she lengthened it all the way to the floor, and in her case beyond the floor. But I thought hers looked pretty nice. Manye did. She had a really lovely duvet cover, actually. It was dark navy with peacocks on it, and I thought the dress was going to look more striking than it actually did. It was a bodice with a mandarin collar, and it had these frills down the front and then gathered onto sort of a high waistband, and then more layers below. So she came unstuck because she didn't have enough time to do all her ruffles and layers, and her gathering was a bit uneven. So I didn't find one with a mandarin collar, but I found something sort of similar with the ruffles down the front here, and a similar kind of shape to the bodice and the skirt, and you just have to put some layers in. So that's 8192. This one has lots of ruffles and layers, but it wasn't anything like the top, but you could sort of pattern hack it with the other one. 8087, that one is. Okay, Steve was the bold neon, kind of looked like kind of a leopardy print, but massive, in black and neon-y blues and oranges, quite striking. And his dress was quite sort of semi-fitted, and it had an invisible zip at the back, and he messed that up a little bit. And said he was going to colour it in with a Sharpie, which is okay if you're not looking too closely, but yeah. Anyway, I couldn't find a pattern like that. Oh, there's Ali coming in the door, ringing the bell. I told her to come in quietly. So he came a bit unstuck. I couldn't find a pattern that was like his, so I picked out a couple of other patterns that I really like for maxi dresses. So we've got McCall's 7925. That's a classic case of choosing the right fabric, because I think that looks stunning in the picture. There's a plus size one, 8209. There are hundreds of maxi dress patterns. I mean, this is just a snapshot of what we got. 8209. And then if you're feeling a bit retro, McCall's have just brought out a retro range, so 8258. So at the end of the day, I think the right person went home. I think Steve was the least experienced sewer there. There were a couple of people who had dodgy week. Marnie had a slightly dodgy week, which surprised me. And Manyi did as well. She did good in the transformation challenge, but in the other two, she struggled a bit. So she's going to have to pull her socks up, as they say. So next week it is Children's Week, and they are going to be making a mini sailor suit and a Halloween costume in the made to measure. So that's something to look forward to. Anyway, have a good week, and we'll see you next week for episode 5. Bye.